Hey there, friends. I'm the Only Sir Cracker, and today we're talking about something absolutely amazing and special. We're talking about onions. Anything and everything to do with onions. And so today, instead of going forward as the way they grow and all that kind of stuff, we're actually going to go backwards. So this is a three-part series, and the first part is going to be all about harvesting onions and preserving onions. Then it's going to be all about growing onions and how to grow onions properly, the different types of onions, different parts of onions, and all that kind of stuff. And then the third part of this wonderful All About Onions series is going to be about how to start onions and when to start onions and different types of things that you can use while starting onions and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot involved here. So sit back, enjoy, and here's All About Onions. Today's Sunday, and here in July, I think it's like one of the last Sundays of the month. When your onions start to fall over and look a little on the sicker side of life, it's usually about time to harvest. Depending on where you're at and when you planted them, you know, how long they've been in the ground, how warm the temperature is, a lot of different factors come into play on when they decide to start falling over. For me, usually it's the end of July, first part of August. And so they start to fall over, and then I just pull them out of the ground, such as this, clean them off, which is not difficult to do if you have two hands. And then I set them out in the sun to dry. And I usually let them sit in the sun for 2 to 3 days, and then it's all about preserving them so I can use them throughout the year. I pulled up some onions, Walla Walla sweet onions. They were just they were begging. They were just begging. All right, so there's many different ways to preserve onions. Many, many different ways. And I'm going to show you 2 examples here. I've separated and cleaned out my onions. These ones right here have got tails on them. They're also a lot bigger. And there's no soft spots, and these will be used to be hung on a strand, and I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. And then also, these are really small. Some of them have a little bit of bad spots and need to be cut out of them. And there's 2 ways that you can preserve small and onions that aren't quite as good as well you'd prefer. And one of them is dicing them up and freezing them or dehydrating them, and the other is to pickle them, and that's what we're going to do right now. We are going to pickle onions. So this is one way to preserve them. Alright, so what I did is I went ahead and took all my really small onions and I peeled them. And I cut both the ends, so I cleaned them up so they're really bright white now. And on the top of the jar, because they're round, I cut 2 of them in half, 1 for each jar, just to be able to make up that extra space. Look at this one, cute, little cute onion. Okay, so in order to can, you need to get yourself a can or bath, such as this, which is just a big, huge pot of hot water. And of course you need one of those, gotta have one of those. I need to get a new one because mine's starting to rust. Which is fine, I'll get a new one here very soon. So what I do is I take the jars, and let's say I'm doing just these 2 jars, okay? Because the jars are full with onions, okay, you really only need half of 1 jar. So, we'll go over here. So, out of this, you have 1 solid full jar of onions, and so if I was to take all these onions and mash them down and cut them in real small bits, they would fill this 1 jar, okay? So basically that leaves me with just 1 jar of liquid that I need. I really kind of like to do it in thirds. So 1/3 vinegar to 2/3 water. That's what I like to do. So I'll take a measuring cup and I will put just 1/3 of water in, or vinegar in, and then 2/3 of water in. 1 mason jar, and I will be putting that in this saucepan. So we will be putting 1/3 of a mason jar of vinegar in here and 2/3 of water, bringing this to a boil, and then we'll be pouring this into those 2 jars evenly. Usually they make a statement, and you can look at a lot of more online stuff. You want to keep it underneath this bottom lip, about a 1/2 inch from the top. In my opinion, it's not that necessary. Onions, once you get the water in them and they move around, they'll float and stuff. You'll have stuff touching the top and not. It's really just more or less the liquid that you want to keep. Just a little bit of a headspace for the liquid. So probably about 1/2 inch for liquid. And I will show you that here in just a few seconds. Okay, so now I've got my 1 part vinegar, 2 parts water here in the saucepan. I will go ahead and turn it up onto a high when I get that boiling so that I can pour it into here. Now this is where it becomes optional. You can add a little bit of sugar to it to make them sweeter, more like a bread and butter kind of flavor, or you can just leave it just vinegar. I actually prefer to add a little bit of sugar, and not much. Too much sugar, and then, you know, you're kind of, what the heck, you know? Just trying to open this with 1 hand. This is fun. Hold on a second. And with the magic of the pause button, I have it open. Alright, so I'm only going to use just a little bit of sugar. I'm not going to go crazy. I want just a flavor, but I don't need it to be like, oh my gosh, that's so super sweet. So, and I didn't measure. I never measure. That's the thing about the kitchen, is I never actually use the measuring cups. And I do have measuring cups. They're in that cupboard somewhere. I just don't use them very often. That's all. Not a huge fan. Oh yeah, and then there's some onions that are dehydrated. And I'll show you that, kind of. I'm not going to do any dehydrating today, but you can dehydrate onions. Okay, so yes, you can dehydrate your onions, and once you get them into, what I just dice them up, kind of like I do when I go to freeze them. And instead of putting them in the freezer, I put them in the dehydrator, and then you can crush them up, and you can make this onion powder. Yeah, I gotta make some more onion powder, but that's how I make my onion powder. Okay, back to what we're currently talking about, onions. As soon as that boils, that's right, I'll pour that in. Put lids on them. And then I'll put them in the deep water bath. Yep, in there. Remember, all that water. Woo! And then it'll be, well, boiling. Probably for about 15 minutes or so. Just until, you know, I think they're nice and hot all the way through. Pull them out, set them on a towel, and let them dry. And I'll show you that here in just a few seconds. Oh, and before I get to that, I wanted to talk to you about your rings and your lids. A thing that you should really need to know, okay? It is imperative that you check your rings. Like that, I just dropped that one. You want to make sure that there's no rust on your rings, because rust on your rings means rust possibly in your food. So don't put any rust on your ring, or let any rust be on your rings. I'm talented with my feet. I will probably Well, that one I'm definitely going to wash now. Normally I wouldn't put them in a hot water bath. Same with my lids. Normally I don't do it. It's one extra step. You can do it. It's not only sterilizes your lids, but it helps soften up this rubber on the outside of your lids to make it soft, and so it'll seal to the edge of the jar. So I don't know. I sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't. It just depends. If I let it sit in the deep water bath for a long time, it's going to end up softening up as well. And anything that goes into a deep water bath really is going to end up getting sanitized either way. The other thing I do, I want you to be really careful that you look. Move these guys out of the way here. The rim of the mason jar, and my focus is all over the place here. This piece of rim all the way around. You want to run your fingers across it gently, very gently, like you're trying to touch your earlobe or something. Very gentle, because you're looking for cracks or chips. You don't want any chips or any cracks. If you find chips and cracks in the tops of your mason jars, you might as well throw them away. They will not seal ever, never, no matter what. So check the tops of the lid of your jars. Make sure that they are nice and clean. Also, with your lids, never reuse your lids. Never, never, never. You can, but it's not recommended. The gasket stuff deteriorates. Once you use it once, it kind of holds a shape and it doesn't want to go back into the shape very well. It also can hold on to bacteria and stuff. You just not a good idea, not a good practice. So definitely get new lids every single time. I personally, I don't care, whatever's cheapest in the store. So either Ball or Kern, doesn't really matter. Grab whatever. It's same with mason jars. I use whatever. I have, let's see, these are Kern. I have Ball jars here someplace. So these ones are all Kern. But I have Balls, Kerns. I have all kinds of different ones. I personally prefer wide mouth jars, especially for onions and a lot of other stuff. And I like the smaller pint-sized jars just because, it seems to make a little bit more sense when you're feeding a small family or something like that. You just have a little bit more control over how much you use. If you have a big jar, sometimes you don't end up finishing the big jar, especially for like salsa. I always put my salsa, or now I should say, I didn't used to, but now I always put my salsa in small jars. It just makes more sense because you may not end up using all of that salsa. All right. All right, so here are my pickled onions coming out of the water bath, and I will set them here on a towel. And let them cool off, and as they cool off, the pressure inside the can or the jar will go down, and it's a science thing. Basically, the air that's in there right now is moving really, really fast and takes up a lot of space. And as soon as it starts to slow down, the air inside starts to slow down and not move as much, which also doesn't take up as much space. So it ends up popping. And so there are, see, there's 5 there, and I have 4 more to go. And that will be my pickled onions for now. So, yeah, cover that back up, and that's pretty much it. So, there is pickling onions. Let's go ahead and take a look at another way to preserve. So the first step to making the hanging thingy is you want to separate your onions out. You want the largest on the bottom. They hold the best weight. And then you want to put them in sequence on what is the largest or the biggest after. That makes no sense, whatever. But you want the smaller onions on the top. And what I've done is I've cleaned up the onion and they're dry, but I've left some tail on it so that I can wrap it, and I'll show you how to do that now. All right there, so this is what we're gonna do. It's pretty kind of cool. So I've taken, this is just a new shoestring, and I've made a loop. I'll show you. Just tied the end of it here and made a loop with it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hang it on a hook that's kind of out of your view here where you can't see it. Now, what I want to do is I want to take the biggest onion that I have, because the biggest onion I have is going to hold the weight. And so you can't just, hang it there. Oh, there it is. You can't really do that. You've got to do it in such a way that the weight of the onion causes this whole thing to hold itself tight. So what I do is I pull it forward like this, make a loop, pull it forward, and then between the loop I grab the two strands. And that's what I do. So loop, grab it, and then fold it back on itself. Okay? And then what I do is I take my onion in that loop and I stick the tail of the onion through that. So then, and I pull it down on the onion as much as I can. And so what that does is it holds the onion in place. So the more you pull on it, the tighter that onion gets. So that is what I do with that. So I always put my largest onion on the bottom. And then I take my next onion, okay, and I open these strands up. Now, I've seen this done before where you just kind of stick it in and then they wrap it around and they do this and that and they pull down like that. The problem with this is if you pull on it, the onion will start to slip out. So there's another way you do it. So instead of putting it in so it's just kind of in this way, turn the onion the other way so it's facing downwards. You stick the onion in downwards and you wrap it around. This one, the neck is still kind of hard. Here, let me grab this one here. There. You want to make sure the neck of it is kind of flexible. You want these to be dried out too as much as possible. These ones are still a little on the wet side. So you stick the onion down this way, okay? And you want to wrap it around one, then wrap it around the other one. So it does this kind of thing. I don't know if you can see that. Let me slide it down. It does this kind of thing, okay? Turn the onion upside down. Well, slide it down. Turn the onion upside down, and you want to pull it so that it locks itself. So it's kind of hanging on itself. That's the trick. If you don't do it that way, then it has a tendency to want to pull. So when you go to put your onion in on the other side, you don't want to put it on the same side. You want to bring it to the other side. And then you want to wrap it and wrap it. And then slide it down gently. And that is how you get it going. And as you go up, you want to get smaller and smaller onions. So this one is on that side, so I want to put this one on this side. And then you pull it down and you let it fall so it goes in between the two. Okay? Now this isn't very tight. I'm not making it quite as tight as I probably could. I could probably make it tighter, but I'm just showing you for demonstration purposes here. So because I came out on that side, I'm going to go in on, where is it, this side. I'm going to wrap it around that one, wrap it around this one, and pull it down. And it just kind of locks itself in place. And that is how you hang onions. So as I go up, the onions will sit in the crevice of each other. And there you have it. So you can take these up as high as you want to go. You can make them as long as you want. Just keep in mind, of course, the further you go, the heavier they get. And then you can also take a pair of scissors if you want to, and come in here and trim off any of these tails.